Greetings, I'm Brooks Graebner, a minister here in Hillsborough, and it's my privilege to bring you a program that's part of a series sponsored by the Historical Foundation of Hillsborough and Orange County under the title of Stores and Stories. This program, which was held at Eno Methodist Church on Sunday, November 7th, 2010, focuses on the mills and mill villages of West Hillsborough that operated between the 1890s and 1980s. This church, Eno Methodist Church, was actually organized in Eno Cotton Mill, and was built on property given to the church by one of the mill owners, Mr. Alan Ruffin. Our program begins with a welcome from the pastor of the church, Brenda Marlowe.
I'd like to welcome everyone here this afternoon, on this beautiful afternoon, and welcome you into this space. And we are very glad that we were able to offer this afternoon to you here. And just know that you all are welcome, and I'm looking very much forward to learning about the history of Hillsborough. And I've heard a lot about some things about the mill village, so I'm looking forward to it, as I know most of you all are. So just a warm welcome to all of you, and we're glad you're here.
At the outset, let me say that it was wonderful to be speaking before a church full of people interested in the stories of West Hillsborough, many of whom grew up in the mill villages and lived and shopped, worked, worshipped, and went to school right here. Now, to set the stage for our panelists, who will share their stories of West Hillsborough life, let me briefly review the history of the creation and expansion of the textile mills and mill villages of West Hillsborough. First came the Eno Mill, founded in 1896 and located on the south side of the railroad track. When it opened in 1897, it held 10,000 spindles, but was soon expanded to contain looms as well. It was started by local merchants Alan Ruffin, James Webb, and George Durham, but became part of the cone mills in the 1930s. The Eno Mill Village at one time contained about 150 homes built in 4 sections, 3 sections going west of the mill, and 1 south of the mill and extending along both sides of the Eno River. Then came Bellevue Mill, established in 1904 and located on the north side of the railroad, with mill housing extending north and west of the mill itself. The impetus for the creation and expansion of textile mills in the southern Piedmont came from the availability of raw materials and a willing labor force. In the 1880s and 90s, many small farmers struggled to make a living in agriculture and were attracted to the mills by the prospect of a regular income. This labor migration is often referred to as the movement from farm to factory. Mills were generally built along railroad lines and rivers, thereby ensuring easy access to markets, raw materials, and the water needed to operate the mills. The mills of West Hillsborough are no exception. The mills and mill community of Hillsborough survived in spite of the Great Depression and World War II. 2, even 3 generations grew up and worked in the mills and mill-related businesses. By the 1950s, however, the mills and mill community were in decline. Symptomatic was the decision in the mid-1950s to clear the Eno Mill Village itself. The houses were moved off mill-owned property and sold to workers who agreed to pay for the removal. At Bellevue, the houses weren't moved. The land was subdivided into small lots and sold, along with the houses, to the workers. Finally, in 1985, the Eno Mill itself closed. 1985. That's already 25 years ago. A generation has passed since the mills in West Hillsborough closed. That's why it's important to have programs like this one and to have them documented, so that we preserve stories from a time now gone in the words of those who remember them from their own lived experience. Now, let's turn to the introduction of the panelists and the sharing of stories from the mill villages of West Hillsborough.
Hey everybody, I'm Charles Stanley. I grew up right here next to this church. I went to West Hillsborough Elementary School. I went to Hillsborough High School. I went to Appalachian State, at that time Teachers College. Got my master's degree at UNC Chapel Hill and became a teacher in Alamance County. And last 25 years I was counselor at Sullivan Alamance High School. I can't go much further because at my age, I might just say, "Who are you people and where's my horse?"
Thank you, Charles. Janie.
I was Janie Carr and then married a Morris. But I grew up in the Bellevue Mill Village at 303 9th Street. And it's already been alluded to about the farm to factory. My parents both grew up on farms in Orange County, and then my father was part of that movement from the farm to factory. I know that they were living in the mill village as early as 1930. That is when they got married. And I believe they lived somewhere else in the mill village before they moved to 303 9th Street. But I'm supposed to talk a little bit about myself, so I'll just say that I lived at 303 9th Street from the time my parents brought me home from what was Watts Hospital until I went to college in 1963. So I'm very familiar with 303 9th Street, and the house still is there. And I think one of the good things about the Bellevue Mill Village is, for historians at least, the houses are pretty much in the way that they were. I think maybe one burned. I know that the front of one house was changed so that it faced another way. But for the most part, those houses are just the way they were when I grew up. Now, people who bought them put siding on. They look a little bit different. Some people expanded them, but they are there. And when you drive through the Mill Village, Holt Street, Knight Street, Webb Street, there are about 3 houses that face Nash Street and Hayes Street. You can get a sense of what it might have been like if you can imagine the streets were unpaved. They were not paved for a very long time. I'm not sure exactly when those streets were paved. But I went on, I graduated from Elon College, what was then Elon College, but is now Elon University. And I worked, most of my career was in the library field. I got a master's degree in library science at Florida State University. And then I worked for over 35 years at Duke University in the library there. So I think that's probably enough.
I'm Owen Allison, and I was born in 1925 on Calvin Street, which the first house from West End. It faces the railroad track. And my father was in the mill for 50 years. And my oldest brother retired as plant manager. And I served my apprenticeship and left. And a few jobs in between there. But I was at Western Electric in Burlington for 31 years and been retired 27 years. And I did manage to get a certificate from high school. World War II in 1943 interrupted my school, and I spent 2 years, 10 months, and 11 days in the U.S. Navy in World War II. So my family, my mother spent 30 years in the spinning room, and my father was overseer for over 45 years. That about covers me, except I've been married to the same lady 61 years.
So I just want to add one thing, that both my parents worked in the mills. Dad worked at Bellevue, Mom worked at Eno. So I got it, of course, when I was 6 years old, I carried Dad's lunch to him. I don't think we let our 6-year-olds do that today. I don't know. Mom went to work on the third shift at Eno when I entered the first grade. And I really never knew the sacrifice she made. Because you see, in the morning, when I got up, Mom was there. She got off work at 7 a.m. So therefore, she helped me get ready for school. When I came home in the afternoon, she was there. She slept during the day, and she was there for me. When I went to bed at night, Mom was there then, because of before she went to work. The day I graduated from college, she quit.
I want to add just a little bit. I was born in 1945, so those of you who have trouble with math, I'm 65. And so most of my memories of the mill village date from the 1950s. I just wanted to clarify that. Both my parents also worked in the mill. My father worked there. It must have been at least 30 years, maybe longer. And my mother worked off and on. Like I know, I was born, she did not go to work back in the mill. She had worked in the mills before. But then she did not go back to work in the mills until I was about 10 years old. And do we want to go ahead and say what they did in the mills? Or is
That would be great. That would be great. I'm going to say something about that. And then, Jamie, if you'll just go ahead and get us started talking about the houses.
Okay, all right. Okay, my father worked, and that part of the mill is still there. But he worked at something, he just referred to it as the folder. And what it literally did was to fold cloth. And I remember I saw it at least a couple of times. I mean, I really think he took me there because he wanted me to, for me to know what he did. My mother worked in, I believe, she referred to it as the cloth inspection room. And I believe what they did was they would cut out any irregularities in the cloth. Now, what happened to it after that, I'm not sure, but I do know that she brought home quite a few scraps of material. And I have over here on display are some scraps that are made into quilt squares. And I'm almost sure, I know the cloth was manufactured in Hillsborough, and I'm almost sure that they were made in Bellevue. Now, I do know that some of my mother's people worked at Eno as well. So I can't be 100% sure, but I believe that's true. And let's see, what else was I supposed to say? Oh, about the houses. I think there are about 30 mill houses there. I hope that's right. It's about 30 that are standing, as I mentioned before. And some of the houses most of the houses were one-story houses, but there were also some two-story houses. Some of the houses were 3 rooms, some of them were 4 rooms, and I am really not sure how many rooms there were in the 2-story houses. But as I mentioned before, I spent a lot of time at 303 9th Street. And I made, before Kay interviewed me for the videotape, I made a little drawing of the house at 303 9th Street just to give people a better idea. I thought it was going to be I thought you'd be seeing it on videotape. But I made several copies. And so I will put 1 or 2 out here, if you're interested. But the house at 303 9th Street had, and I don't think you all can see, but I will hold it up and you can look at it more in detail later. There was a front porch, and then we had 4 rooms, and I'm pretty sure that the rooms were all about the same size. And then there was a back porch, which and the living part of the house, I would say, was about 800 square feet. I don't think it was any more than that, and it may have been a little bit less than that. I'm not sure, but it was about 800 square feet. The diagrams that you see, that some of you may be able to see, represent doors. So that if you came in the front porch, you went into the living room, and if you wanted to go from the living room to the kitchen, you had to go through at least 1 bedroom to get to the kitchen. Now, at the back, there was also a back porch, and like I say, my memories date from the 1950s. At some point, the houses were not originally built with inside bathrooms. At some point, and I do not know, maybe someone else here does know,
I can tell you.
what year did they decide to put in?
I was working for Duke Power Company in the late 40s and early 50s, and that's when the individual homes were hooked up to Duke Power Company instead of the mill, and that's when they put the bathrooms in the back porch.
Well, that's what I was thinking, that it was somewhere along there. So I have really no recollection of using an outhouse, but I would have been probably about 5 years old when the inside bathroom was put in. Now, what they did was, the porch was larger, but they took half of the back porch and made that into the bathroom. Now, as I understand, the powers that be in the mill did decide to do that for the residents. Now, as I understand it, and I could be off here, that when the health department told Eno that they had to put in inside bathrooms, that was the time that they decided to move the houses, to offer the houses for sale to the people who were already living in them. And then that is a point at which the houses were moved off the mountain.
Charles, do you have anything to add to that at this point?
Yeah, just a thought about the houses. I live right here, and I know that of the 146 or pretty close to 150 houses on the Eno Mill Hill, there was no indoor plumbing. When Cone bought the plant, I think that was probably early 1950. Right after that is when the houses started moving because of the pressure to have the indoor plumbing. It was really interesting to look out your window every day and see a house going by. Initially, what I saw was the fact that these people did not own their homes. But when I don't know how much, and somebody in here will say how much came out of the paycheck for the rental of those houses. But I remember when those houses were moved that the houses became theirs because they paid, I forgot, someone tell me, $25 a room or $50 a room?
$25 a room, I think.
$25 a room. And then they had to pay to move the houses.
Houses moved.
But what I saw initially was when these houses moved all over the area here, I saw paint, I saw flowers being planted, I saw things that changed because that was their homes at that point. It's interesting to see the education building here is one of those mill houses. It's interesting to see how those things changed over time, and how long it took for nature and to see the church is facing the mill village, which is no longer is there. I've got some pictures of the mill village, and it's interesting on how that did change. It's almost like this church took one of its children and nestled it by its side over here after the village was gone.
I just wanted to make one more comment about the houses. At some point, Bellevue decided to sell the houses, and I don't know, I believe it was the late 1950s or early 1960s. I'm seeing some nods here. So they decided to sell the houses to the people who, of course, they offered it first to the people who already live in there. It was very, what we would say today, we would just say that was just plain cheap. And I'm not sure. I know they sold it by the rooms. They sold it. So, do you know how much it was? $50 a room. In that section.
1,600 for hers. I got
1,600. Well, I'm so glad you're here to say, because I had forgotten exactly. I knew it wasn't very much. And I'm assuming, did they count the bathroom as a room in the house, or did they count that? I don't know.
The bathroom went in the house, and so
Oh, I think it was. I think the bathrooms are already there.
But anyway, it was 50 a room, but I
50 a
don't know
room.
that
Uh-huh.
included.
Okay, well, you can see, I mean, and so my parents probably paid about, what would that be, $200? Or maybe, I knew it was what we would say just cheap today, right? Mhm.
Great. Thank you for that very helpful picture of the mill housing and also noting that by sometime in the late 50s or early 60s, none of that was mill-owned housing anymore. Either as in Bellevue, the housing remained in place, but the small lots were created and sold to the individual occupants, or in the case of the Eno village, the houses were just moved off of the mill property itself and relocated.
Brooks, Doug Marlette in his novel The Bridge remarked, someone asked him, where's the mill village now? And in his novel he says, it's still there, it's just hidden under the kudzu. For many of us, the village is still there for us and is hidden under the kudzu of our minds.
Thank you, John. Yeah. Let's turn to the subject of education and talk a little bit about schooling here in, and I know that I think that all three of you go to the school here. So, let's start with you and then move down this way. Talk a little bit about going to school. Talk a little bit about going to school here.
Well, first thing, there was originally where it was a Church of God here at Mexico that was a grammar school, 2-story wooden frame building, and then later they built the brick and a much bigger and nicer school up by the the Baptist Church. We all went to high school at Hillsborough on Tryon Street, if I'm not mistaken. And at the times I'm talking about it, until the middle of World War II, it was 1 through 11 grades, everybody going to the same school, and Mr. Grady Brown was principal, and he was God. But you had some very dedicated teachers. One of the problems was that there wasn't as many buses. The children that lived in West Hillsborough on Eno Mountain and Bellevue and in West Hillsborough walked to school. And until you hit the original 1 mile square city limits of Hillsborough, there wasn't any sidewalks. And one of the reasons here over the years that we had many people killed by the train on these railroad tracks out here, because the people in West Hillsborough had to walk to West End where the satellite post office was at. There was no home delivery. And so you had to walk the railroad, because the street that you now see on the north side of the railroad didn't exist. It went under the underpass and over in front of Eno Cotton Mill. And in order to get to what we call Mexico, you had to cross the railroad here. And the school children had to walk those places. In fact, rural, you had to be in rural, and I believe at one time you had to be like 2 miles from the school before you could even ride a school bus. Does that pretty well cover it?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, I went to West Hillsborough School for the first 6 grades. And I think I had some very good teachers. And some of you folks, I know you know them. Mrs. Dorothy Cole taught 3rd grade. Mrs. Margaret Phelps taught 5th grade. And I believe it was in that class where she read Great Expectations. Anyhow, she would read us, she would actually read us novels. And I really always enjoyed that. Then in the 6th grade, I had Mrs. Harris, who I always thought was just such a glamorous looking woman. She was rather tall, she was rather large. I mean, she was tall and rather large, and had this solid white hair. And she not only taught 6th grade, she was also the principal of the West Hillsborough School. And one of the things I just like to mention, I know one of the boys in the 6th grade, he was in my grade, he was a very good artist. And he used, what do you call it? Anyhow, not oils, but watercolors. And he painted the Taj Mahal. And Mrs. Harris, I don't know why I remember that. It's funny what you remember, but he did an excellent job. I don't know, he must have seen a picture or something in an encyclopedia or a book or something. And he painted it, and Mrs. Harris was so impressed. I believe she put that picture in her office. She was showing it to all of us. And I don't know why I remember it, but I thought I had some very good teachers at West Hillsborough School. And then I went to what the people in West Hillsborough called Uptown School. And I was terrified because I thought, I'm not going to know anything. I mean, I just know they all know more than I do. So this was a huge transition for me. And in the grades 1 through 6, there was only one class in each grade. So there were, and the other thing was that the kids who started out, I mean, you pretty much knew each other. You knew because if you were promoted to the 2nd grade, then you were in the same class with other kids, and you really knew them. And then when you went to Uptown School, then we were just kind of scattered.
West Hillsborough Elementary School was, it was great. I think about some things that did happen that you don't ever forget, and that's in the 1st grade. Miss Maddie Blackwood was the 1st grade teacher. I'll never forget that somewhere along the way, Brent Wilder's not here, is he? So he can't defend himself. But Brent, he told on me about something, and she had that ruler, and she could really whack your hand. I'm assuming, I don't remember that part, but I'm assuming that's what happened. So my plans were, Brent and I, we walked home from school every day together, and I said, I'm going to get him after school, And here I'm walking down the road, and we get right down the bottom of the hill here on Ruffin, and I turned to him, and I said, okay, let's fight. And I punched him on the shoulder. He said, what about it? He said, because you told on me. And he started to cry. Well, I started to cry. I think probably that's as close to ever getting into a fight in high school. I know that my dad came from a Quaker background, and I know that he at least once has told me a good run is better than a bad fight, and so that's the way it went. But I'm always grateful and thankful for those people that they would, regardless of what family situations were going on, there were teachers who would listen, and that was so important to us.
I just want to make one more statement about Grady Brown, Mr. Grady Brown being God. I will never forget that one time in assembly, he smoked, and he really didn't want to smoke, but he did. And he said, and since I have started smoking, he said, I have spent at least $5,000. And he said, you know what I could have gotten with that $5,000? I could have gotten a Cadillac and a Chevrolet. And I don't know if that's just something else that I remember, but he really was trying to encourage us, of course, not to smoke.
Thank you, Janie. These are wonderful vignettes. Now, Charles, if you'll start us off talking a little bit, Charles? Yeah. Charles, if you'll start us off talking a little bit about the churches here. We can start with this church right here and talk a little bit about your association with this church.
Well, I never knew, by living next door to the church, I never knew when the church bell rang I had a choice of whether to come or not. And, think of it, I didn't know I could skip school either. But things you learn over the years. when I look at things, I mean, we didn't even have a car in our family. Frank Grill was a minister here at that, when I became 16, and he actually taught me how to drive. He and Mr. Allman in driver's ed. Everybody else in driver's ed already knew how to drive a car, but no, I didn't. Okay. The role that the ministers, what kind of role models do we have? We had a teacher as a professional role model, and we had his wife was, and the minister was a positive role model, and his wife was usually a teacher, and it was, very, very important to us. As far as the church is concerned, we loved each other here. In fact, several of us married each other that were in the youth group together. She doesn't like me to tell this in public, and I won't ask her to stand because you'll see her beating on me later. But when I was about, 8 or 9 or 10, maybe younger than that, I'm sitting there in that window and I look out and I see this lady leading this girl away from school, from the church, and she's crying. The little girl is crying. And I don't know what I'd done, but I knew it was my fault. Several years later, she